Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, on this very third day of the Freedom Game, and welcome to the panel, which was the latest to be created for these Freedom Games, and it was established to reply to the moment that actually happened to us, a moment that forces us to ask a number of vital questions. Let me just say that when my partner to the crime, with whom I'm going to run this conversation, this dialogue, approached me with the idea, I was right after a conversation with Professor Czapliński, whom we welcome online with us, and that was the talk about nature's legal personality, how we can introduce nature into law, not just as something that surrounds us, but something that is our partner, our co-citizen. I'd like to welcome to this panel Zbigniew Bakalarczyk, a lawyer and mediator, social activist, Karolina Kuszlewicz, attorney at law. I should say a lawyer, a woman who knows everything about nature. Professor Przemysław Czapliński, a literature specialist, philosopher, thinker, and Ewa Marcjoniak. Again, thank you for being with us. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to us. And I trust this is the moment to ask questions regarding to what has happened at the Oder River. Some of these would be legal questions, some would be what we think about ourselves as a component of the surrounding world. And I'd like to begin from a Da Vinci's quote that the story of water, the water you touch in the river is the last that has passed, the first to come. Same with the present. Water, when we stand on the river bank, on the bank of the Oder River, ask questions about what there was, there is, there will be. First, I wouldn't need to ask Przemek in a philosophical manner. We are on the bank of the Oder River. We are facing our doubts, but we are also facing a current and future approach to nature. Well, many practical matters bring us to on the bank. However, we try to work. However philosophical we want to be, we need to be practical. Well, you can't be practical, in fact, because whatever is involved with the river came to the surface. First of all, the river is something we name a liquid map, a liquid geography. That is one that doesn't honor stiff borders, border posts, walls. It simply flows, linking different areas belonging to various ecosystems. That is the case of the Oder River that belongs to two states. So the river should make or force us to cooperate. So map then the river's life cycle, like that of any ecosystem, is also a cycle of minor or major deaths. I remember Adam Weirach, after he created the first comic strip devoted to the forest, he added the second part. The first was entitled The Forest Lives. The second one was The Forest Dies. And that was the comic response to the manipulation of death forest by the government, who wanted to use it to justify another human intervention. In his comic, he said, "Get off the forest. The forest lives by its cycle of birth and death. It is its existence." Same with the river. The panic that erupted after 1 or 2 weeks of concealing the case only proves that the government would like to control whatever is permanent, lasting, unambiguous, binary, 0-1, black and white. But the government cannot, is not humble enough in terms of understanding the ecosystem. So the government representatives were trying for the first fortnight to conceal the matter, and then they tried to find the guilty party whom to put imprisoned or leash in public. So the liquid map is the first issue. The second issue are ecocycles. They are poorly known. If somebody follows for this type of policy of disposing of the world. Finally, there is the third issue. I should start from our quick, vivid, lively social reactions. People live on the riverbanks and they are first to see that fish. The fish doesn't immediately, that fish doesn't immediately come to the bank. So one pollution is followed by another one. The social reaction to the river, its life, was healthy, natural. There was some fear in it, but also care, interest, will to help, to act. All that, unfortunately, was pushed down. Leave it alone. Don't deal with that. We will test it. Samples were taken. So the third thing, following the Oder poisoning, is eco-social sphere, the mingling of the ecosystem with the human system. So people live along the river. They participate in its life, some simply by walking, others go fishing, others have their homes nearby, houses nearby. So what we should be thinking from now on, a liquid map, ecocycles, including deaths today, that when we know it was iciotoxin, we understand how rapidly death cycles can show within the life cycle. Thirdly, we should think about ecosystems and social systems as inseparable. They overlap. People belong to ecosystems, participate in them, and vice versa. They penetrate the social sphere. The three things map, overlapping spheres, these are things I put into the conversation. I'll take you to this liquid map. Zbigniew, about the liquid map. What does it give us? How do we see that? It's been a number of days. No, it's been a number of weeks, months, in fact. We keep asking questions, the questions that have brought us here. But what, in the very beginning, comes out of it for us who come to the river? Our problem with the river and the liquid map is that we, as people and representatives of the statehood, not us but the government, do not see that liquidity. The response to the river's problems usually involves more regulations, more put concrete, more requirements, new institutions that would take care of the river. Institutions that failed during the Oder crisis, or they did act, but the test results, inconvenient for the governing party, were hidden until no longer the disaster could be concealed. The size of it was too large. We do not see that liquidity. It seems to us that we can split the river into pieces and assign responsibilities to different entities, then look for the guilty ones. That's more of a legal approach because we like to find a culprit. We look for the blame, but it can't be done. The river is a living organism, extremely complicated. Despite the years of science, education, development, there are still many things we do not understand. Though plethora of people would believe we know anything. We can solve the issues whichever way we want. That is why I search to other cultures. To cultures that have for ages been disputing whether the river can be exploited. Can we perceive it as something that belongs to us, or should we treat it as part of us? So it's obvious we are discussing legal personality of elements of nature. The New Zealand example comes to my mind immediately, where there is law that recognizes legal personality of a river, and it starts with poetic words from the beliefs of the Maori people. I am the river is me. This is a seldom example where a legal text involves such wording, but what's beautiful and fascinating, the New Zealandic legislature brought these words to a status that is unbelievable in the European legal system. Last but not least, also from that beautiful law, when it speaks about the river, the law says the river is an entity. River, water, fish, and organism in it, the water on which it flows, people that live along its edges, companies built around it. It's all one unity, from the mountains down to the sea. That's beautiful and incredible. This is what Przemysław Czapliński says when he speaks about eco-socio-sphere, the combined system, how we cannot exist without each other. You remind us of the New Zealandic laws. There is a river that has its rights. In Canada, it was recognized that the river has 9 rights. It can be represented before the court. And the first recognized law was worked out by the cooperation of local communities and the governing authorities of the Quebec province, that the river has the right to flow freely. I want to get back to your words. And Carolina, a question to you about eco-social sphere, the whole, the entity. What about this whole? Before we go into our legal concept, what's it like from eco, but also ideologic perspective? From my perspective, two areas. One that involves redefining our attitude to nature, and the example of that redefining can include such provisions as in New Zealand, but it is a deeper process of a new, in the 21st century, look at relations with the nature as being its part, but also as being a human that has enormous powers of destructions at hand. I don't want to make the river romantic. For me, it's litigation. It's lots of heavy work. That brutalizations are what we talk. Pragmatics has nothing to do with observing the river as an entity. It should be like that, but it isn't. So I would like to look the practical perspective from courts. I'm running the case of the Vistula River in 2018. There was an eco disaster that was pretty publicized. There, the Wody Polskie company, Polish Waters, who have this enormous tools to manipulate the river, the nature, that is the dam, artificially raised the water level on the Vistula River by 1 meter during the hatching season for birds, and that resulted in washing off hundreds and thousands of nests and young birds. It destabilized the life of those animals. A river is not just relations human nature, but also the life of animals. And this is a biocentric point of view, not creating the river protection based on human relation, but it's not the only element there. We should see all the other elements. That water was raised by 1 meter. The nests were destroyed, animals killed. And in a couple of months later, we had another incident where the Polish water closed water flow in the Vistula River from day to day. The water was falling so rapidly, fish couldn't escape. Based on our estimates, at least 5 million fish died. What does it look like from today's court perspective? A river is not represented today at all. You can represent the river by joining the criminal proceedings based on regular regulations on the aggrieved party, but that never works. The only solution is that to point out that animals died in the river. This is the only legal item regarding crime against animals. It allows to act. This procedural section, just to be allowed to let eco-organization that loves the Vistula River, it took us 1.5 years to persuade the court that there is a way to represent the river without breaching the procedure. We appealed twice, and now it's the 4th year of the proceedings. These are very difficult issues where things we discuss here, which in the courtroom tends to be out of this world. These are two different worlds. We fight for absolute grounds. We fight to introduce proper scientific knowledge into the proceedings that would truly show how the ecosystem works. In our opinion, the justice system in Poland, with due respect to judges, is absolutely unprepared for nature's presence in courtrooms. And you can see that in practice. So apart from redefining relations, that is our relation to nature, coexistence in different areas, that means mental, institutional, we also need practical changes involving the activations of proper procedures, or probably writing them from scratch, that would provide protection for rivers. If there are procedures resulting from granting legal personality to rivers, which is nice, but it can be impractical if not followed by procedure. Or if these are just good procedure without this legal personality, without redefining the river in the law, from my perspective, I don't care. I would just like to have strong tools to act on behalf of the organization regarding rivers, mountains, forests.
Referring to what Karolina has just said, one justification for you. Not only do we have lawyers with you, Karolina was speaking about procedural in lie in front of the court. Nobody represents the rights of the river because the river is devoid of that. It is human that has got the right to use the river, to manage it, to derive benefits. And the only right it enjoys is the protection of environment, that is its ecosystem. So what was Karolina was speaking about was in legal representation. So these lawyers represent the river, or better to say, people who want to represent it, so that it is saleable, recreational, fishable, with potable. Zbyszek, you started speaking about this concept of subjectivization of the river as a living, animate thing. It may seem to you strange. Some of you may find it close to your heart. Some may find it strange that there is a person, an animate person or being, as those in Mauritian and Quebec say. So a legal entity that is recognizing river as animate object was combated for by the people living by it. In Mauritius people, these were Iwi and Liteawa, Takoa and Pupua peoples and other Iwis that used the river. And they resulted in New Zealand's parliament, after many a battle that started in 1980s, finally recognized the Wanganui River that is called Te Awa Tupui. This court granted it legal personality. indivisible being, from the mountains as far as the sea. Metaphysical and biophysical wholeness, so personal ones, were accommodated for. A river, a living being, animate being, has been granted the right to exercise its personal rights, and those who want to live by it, manage it, make use of it, must respect it and collaborate with one another. It was a longish yet necessary introduction. Over to you, Zbigniew. Do you see this possibility to streamline the legal issues of the Oder River and other rivers? It's a very simple question with a very complex answer. From a legal point of view, I believe both attorneys of law agree with me. Granting legal entity is pretty simple because it's just one sentence, because it has been the notion that has been known in Polish legal system for years and in European legal systems for centuries. It has got personal rights and the tools to protect the latter. But if we go into details, the things become complex. Foundations, companies, associations, collectives of people can define their interests and their objectives. A river cannot speak out, saying what its interest is. Be it a river, a mountain, a stretch of forest cannot speak. Similar in New Zealand, there is organizational development of legal personality so that the people who are interested in representing rivers' interests are able to say what this interest lies in, so that it is possible to finance the interest, because it's just beautiful words without finances, and hardly can you organize anything sensible. And there are ways to single out legal representatives of the river. In theory of law, a legal personality needs to have entities that speak on behalf of this legal personality. Like board of managers in a limited liability company is the one that airs out opinions on behalf of the company. I'm not going to speak in Mauritian, I don't know the language, but there is two-person office. One of them is elected by the Crown, because New Zealand is still a part of the Commonwealth, the other part selected by the Crown, and the other by the EV, the organization, Maori Association. Can we translate it into Polish and European legal system? With a special endeavor, yes. Having listened to Karolina, I'm wondering how much is that needed? Do we need this far-reaching personal advancement? We are lawyer practitioners. We know what is the judicial system and innovative conceptions, what is the adoption pace. I'm wondering, and well, I can reverse the question, and Karolina will answer it. Wouldn't be enough, instead of looking for legal personality or assigning legal personality to a river, wouldn't be enough to supply social organizations that are into ecology or rivers, depending how they are organized, purely in-court representation of the interest. Just like social organizations may represent those in a disadvantaged position. So let me modify this question. This goes to Karolina. Do you believe that the regulations that we have, and there are myriads of regulations, at least 5 acts on waters, groundwaters, underground waters, not only rivers. So do you believe the regulations that pertain to water management, even if we speak about environment protection, we speak about sustainable use? Do you think that the solutions that we have in Poland and in other European countries, Poland is not special, EU directives also indicate environment protection so that the environment is managed in a safe and sustainable way? So the regulations that pertain to environment protection for human needs, without the transposition that this is a being that is devoid of its own rights, but the right to serve people, do you think these regulations are sufficient? So that you or anybody else, but you wanted to say this, that you can be a proxy of such a being? That was a question. We cannot hear you. Okay. How about now? Yes, we can hear you. Barely. I need to do some switching in my computer. Can you hear me now? The regulations that are binding today need to be divided into 2 basic groups. This is a systemic division. One group that are indicative law. Karolina, I'm sorry, but your voice disappears. How about plugging in your headset? Let me try. I don't know what is the reason, but the computer says no. Hello? Yes, it's much better now. Almost ideal. Let me start again. A brief introduction. In law, there are material laws, what are indications and bans, things you can and cannot do, do's and don'ts, with regards people and animals. And the other group, procedures, how to execute the do's and don'ts section. In both groups, the environment protection regulations are insufficient. If there are bans and indications, still they are human. And the executive laws are not there in place. So, referring to the first speaker, would it be enough to improve the procedural ones? We should do both. We should introduce regulations that enhance systemic protection of the river. So the river is protected on its own right. For our English listening audience, there is still problem with the connection. Karolina, can you hear us? I cannot hear you. The managers of Wody Polskie, of the catchway department, have been sued. They are regarded culprits, not because this is a case as it is, but we said that the victims were the birds and the fish, so something outside the river of the scope as such. So we need regulations with regards to water protection, the ecological disaster, saying that a river is the living environment for other beings. And on top of that, it would be useful and real to introduce good regulations and procedures that inform you that if there is a dispute with regards any kind of damage on the river, in the forest, drastic deforestation, which happens on little hills in Bieszczady, and there is alleged crime, or we have administrative procedure to stop this, to stop dam construction, water disposal on the Vistula River. We, the ecological organizations, we are guaranteed to be one of the parties, so we can file in evidence, question, represent a river in front of the court of law. Intermediate, what is missing now, because there are general ones, but we need to fight for convincing the court that these tools can be used. According to my knowledge, these regulations are insufficient. Sometimes you cannot be a party in a proceeding, so there is no voice of anybody who would represent the Vistula in total, in ecosystemic way, the value of the river, the fish. There'll be no voice of this kind. What is most important is to enhance the proceedings, the regulations that make it possible for the organizations to represent without an 18 months battle to be admitted into the courtroom. When you are speaking about the representative voice, the voice that, as a matter of fact, can air out opinions on behalf of those who have no possibility. This is the thing with the river. When we refer to those both peoples, specificity in New Zealand or Canada, specificity of their beliefs, specificity of their culture, the river seems to be rooted in the latter. The river is the life, the indispensable part of human life, something that you are speaking about, eco-sociosphere, Przemek, and also the elements that you enter into as a part of the world that had already been there, and these peoples cannot comprehend it in separation. So I've got a feeling that nature is treated as if something happening on the side. In the situations like the one with the Oder River, the deforestation, the water disposal that Karina was speaking about, dozens of situations or disasters make us think. We see that it is part of our existence, that we are a unity of this environment. I had a very nice discussion with Przemysław Czapliński on representation. This is what I want to ask you about, the representation and how we think about the river, nature, them being a person. A person or a subject? The representation principle as such is the justification for my presence here. Thank you for inviting me. I was listening to you pretty attentively, alarmed and full of hope, listening to legal practitioners, which makes me realize that if I can be of any help, is the question of representations. In human language, being man, you cannot avoid being the state of being an usurper. You cannot say that my words are the words of the river. River needs to be translated. It's a pity Ania Barcz is not here with us. She is a wonderful literary research. She was the first to write a paper on this troublesome relation between man and nature. Troublesome and yet indispensable, which requires man to admit, I am a mere representative. Hardly can I be the owner. Hardly can I speak in lieu. And it will be intermediated representation, which is very important to diminish the powers. Some of ecological being skips human awareness, cannot be expressed through human language unless we find some other translators, unless we have the capability to listen to ecosphere in a direct way. There should be natural environment representatives in the parliament. We could start with every political party to necessity to present ecological agenda. So you cannot have a political problem without ecological agenda. They can propose anything. There'll be parties that will say, we'll put concrete all over the place. No mosquito can sit on people's skin. I do not allow the wind to press me down to the ground, for the rain to wet me through. So we'll create cities of glass. I am not saying what a political party is supposed to say, but every political party should be obliged to include ecological questions in their programs. We can also agree that every political party has got a representative that is responsible for environmental questions. In a more radical option, you can imagine this way. In the parliament, there are ombudsmen of natural environment as such, or particular parts of it, that are independent of political parties. It was German experiment. In Landtags, so kind of voivodeship parliaments, there were representatives of water, animals, and fauna and flora generally. It's associated with experimenting. I am returning to the issue of representation. Literature is not reality. Literature, painting, film can represent reality. The same story goes with human representation not being equal with the presence of natural environment in our legal life. Ever since the beginning,
when it appears, it needs to be accompanied by the awareness that it's a very expressive translation between languages. It is something like ontological translation from one existence into the other existence. Therefore, we are dealing with legal communication and political and social experiment. So we need to give ourselves the right to introduce corrections. In some time that will happen. The Polish parliament will have representatives of waters, plants, animals. Once they are there, they will be part of this alternating narrative. Their presence would be of experimental nature. We mustn't set finite regulations to apply for 20 years. We need to embed into this phenomenon, we need to embed into it the rule of continuing amendment. So, the representation we are now talking about must from the very beginning be based on the awareness of differences between the phenomena, the entities represented so far, because a company board that represents the company speaks the same language and has the same existence form. Spokespersons of institutions have the same language. In the case of an ecosphere, water, animals, plants, there is a change of the language. It's translation from a code to a code. That's why we may be useful literature specialists, because literature dares to take such experiments, because the global writing has had attempts to speak for, on behalf, from the perspective. The literature has been experimenting in this field by giving the voice to birds, forests, waters, leaves, etc. There are no boundaries, and that's the point. That's this tiny contribution. I don't know if the professor can hear me. Professor, can you hear us? When you speak about the language and the necessity to change it, I want to get back to you, Eva, with a question. On one hand, we do change the language, the thinking, but we also need to change our axiology, our evaluation. When you speak in the legal categories, there is use, exploitation, and value comes at the very distant position. The point is that use means taking something away. Yesterday, during one of my panels, I quoted Magda Schroeder. Perhaps our axiology or ontology requires the replacement of human with the term life. And when we observe life, it's closer to the legal personality we are looking for. Life. Some time ago, I wrote a text for a publication entitled Zoe Polis, and the common denominator was a text philosophical and legal rather than practical. There, I looked for a common denominator for the future, for the representation of animals, natural elements, plants, human, and the common denominator is life. In the sphere of animals, it's also the ability to sense. In other spheres, it's just mere existence that gives grounds to be represented in the system. Obviously, the change of the lexis is something more, is the change of axiology, a expression of our perceiving relation in terms of legal regulations. It also we have to look at the language used in the courtrooms. This language needs to be changed into one that is more sensitive, but it cannot become the language of poetry. It will never be as sensitive as what we can use in this debate, but it can be a language that addresses values. And an example of that language is the language of international UNESCO contract on World Heritage. There we reach for values, the need to protect natural processes. It doesn't speak about using, exploitation. They speak about care, protection, that the nature is very important by itself for the people, for future generations. That's a load of work to be done, but the common denominator is the right to existence, as noted by the Supreme Court in 2016 in the case on fish. It stated that the basic right of each animal is the right to exist. And in that narrative, harsh law, brutal words, there are small spaces, sentences that speak about fish right to exist. When we speak of protection, we speak from the position of the one who's supposed to protect. If so, axiologically, we are above those whom we protect. The protected one is subordinate to that who protects. Therefore, we act from the position of the force, despite the fact we are protecting. If we care, we also protect. So we believe something is weaker than us. We care, we protect. So we are still in the dominating position. We are the dominants. In terms of the legal language, all the laws that speak about natural protection, nature protection, speak from the human dominating stance. But referring to what Karolina said in the very beginning about life, the life cycle, the everlasting life cycle, unformalized, Zoe, or Zoe, as we say today. The Greek distinguished Zoe and bias. Bias, a specific life. Yours, your dogs, your fish. They also distinguished a life that was formless in continuing circle of life. That way they spoke about the existences of nature, and the Zoe was in very, very old ages, far before the Christ age. So it's worth to reach for that concept mentally. And this is the concept that is so close to the peoples we have referred to. Will such concept, Zbyszek, is it acceptable for us? Is it comprehensible to us? Well, I'm asking about education, ecological, of course, but also legal, because we often do not know how to do it, even from the perspective of a regular citizen, but somebody who, like you, who deals with representation by profession. Well, I believe they have already made the first step en route. We recognize we live in the Anthropocene, and we recognize anthropocentrism, the focus on ourselves in our language. I listened to Karolina when she spoke about UNESCO conventions that speak about care, protection. What you ever said is paternalistic. We, the people, shall care, protect this poor nature that will perish without us. No. When we refer to the peoples that see the personality of the nature, that there are we, the people, and she, the river, she, the mountain, it, the nature. These are not just examples from New Zealand, from Canada. There are cases from Ecuador, India, many other countries where it's very poetic, of course, but we speak about subjectivity. There are people who recognize the Mother Earth, that say there are us, there is the Mother Earth. We are equal in existence. We are partners. When we refer to that language, we can speak about care, protection, but we miss this element of subjectivity. When we speak of our partner, we don't say we will take care. We say we are equal entities with same rights, same obligations. When we speak of legal education, we should say that the legal concept of legal personality of natural entities is pretty strange for European systems. We have far deviated from that personality, subordinating Earth to ourselves. And because of that, it's very difficult to get back to that. And the debate that is happening, the activities of organizations Karolina represents clearly state that we have to look for that personality just to give our partner, the nature, new old tools so that it can fully enforce the laws that it possesses by the nature of its existence. And there is this element inside that we skip or miss. When you were speaking about the partnership, it came to my mind that we should start seeing reciprocability, relations between nature and us and nature. And that would be the very first step that has allowed in the law to use these poetic words, I am the river is me. If we see these mutual relations instead of our paternalism or subject the earth, but if we opt for reciprocability, the relations, it will be far easier for us to speak about nature, tree, creature, non-human creatures, as of those who are our partners in being in this world. Thank you very much. The Defensor Iuris, Lawyers Association, for bringing us into this discussion. Defensor Iuris as a partner to this Freedom Games. I hope it's our first but not last form of cooperation. I'd like to thank Karolina, Przemek, Ewa, Zbyszek. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. Stay with us. Read, listen, talk. Thank you.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it and how it feels, how it tastes. what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Ihre Ausreise.
Atlas Network is, as the name suggests, a network, and it's global. We work all around the world. We're based in the U.S. We have about 159 partners in the United States right now, and the bulk of our partners are outside, nearly 500 in total.
Atlas Network, it connects people from all over the world, defending the idea of human dignity, defending human rights and personal liberties.
Atlas Network is focusing on, I think, the most important and moral cause in the entire world.
We partner with local innovators, local leaders who understand conditions on the ground in communities facing real challenges. We look at the people from the worldwide freedom movement that are passionate, are ready to make a difference, understand local conditions, and we invest in them.
At Atlas Network, we unleash individual ingenuity to enrich humanity.
The United States does not have a lock on the idea of freedom and liberty. Those ideas are beyond borders.
One of the main goals of Atlas Network is to eradicate poverty around the world, and we do that by investing millions of dollars in our partners' work every year.
Historically, wealthy nations around the world have tried to help low-income countries develop. The way we've been doing it traditionally has not really been working. So there's a movement to do development differently, and that means we need to step back as outsiders and rethink the role that we're playing in helping people in low-income countries achieve their dreams.
We want to make the world a better place. We want to make the world a freer world.
All of us want to leave a legacy and be part of something big to make a better world. This is exactly the work of Atlas Network.
With our growing number of hundreds of successful partners, we're stronger than ever.
Changing the world
Changing the world
Changing the world
starts together
with us.